DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, how you doing, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. So, tell me about the week. Was it good? Were you at the African American Day Parade? Did
I
you
was
march?
there. Yes, I was there for almost the entire parade. Saw most of it. Saw lots of marching, and there were a lot of healthcare sponsored floats this year. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the WBLS and Hot 97 were on the same float now. So I
Oh,
guess, times have
wow.
changed and they had to shack up. So, you
Wow.
know,
So you're
Funk,
saying detente,
yeah,
huh?
yeah. Funk Master Flex was up there with Red Alert, and, neither of them were DJing, but they were just waving to the crowd and somebody else was DJing behind them. So,
I love it. I love it. Well, you say a lot of healthcare floats, huh? So
yeah,
even me with my bum hip, I could have been there, huh?
you could have been there, but you probably wouldn't stay long.
Well, you know what, man? As we talk about some of the floats and some of the visuals and whatnot, we think about sometimes, I guess, art, huh?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so some good sightings. So you know what? I was thinking about what was happening, especially with one of these our guests this evening, about her back and forth to what we think of as the Motor City or Motown.
Hmm.
And we also think about our other guests in terms of what was happening at the Africa Center.
Hmm.
So you know what, Night Watchman, I'm going to flip scripts. Why don't you bring them out?
All right, you can't tease them any longer, right? Let's bring
No,
them out.
that's it. Yes.
So let's give first of all Michelle first time on Soul Lounge Prime Time. Oddly enough, because she is a good friend and
Hmm.
an arts warrior. She's the founder and executive director of Harlem Needle Arts, an arts and cultural organization at the forefront of revolutionizing, preserving, and expanding the narrative of fiber, textile design, and needle arts in the African diaspora through exhibitions, education, technical support, economic development, and other tools. HNA creates platforms for the inclusion of the art forms on the stages of museums, galleries, and publications. How
Beautiful.
about that?
Yay, Miss Bishop. Welcome.
Good, good
Welcome.
evening.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe this other one, have we seen her before, Night Watchman?
Yes, yes, she is a returning guest. She comes regularly through the Soul Lounge Prime Time. We are always glad to have her back. And she is hailing this morning from the city of Detroit, even though she's regularly here in Harlem. So she is, she's a
Well, hold
mover.
it. I have not seen her in a while, so you may have seen
I
her.
saw her literally outside your office just days ago. Yeah.
Oh,
See?
wow.
That's
Okay.
right. That's
Okay.
right. That's right. She got witnesses, okay?
Okay.
If they tried to get her for a crime in Detroit, I would be her alibi, okay?
Yes.
I wasn't there. Yeah.
Well, welcome you two. Oh my God.
Thank
So,
you.
I mean, I'm definitely thrilled to have you, especially you, Michelle, because it's your first time on Soul Lounge Prime Time, and for myself, having visited the Africa Center and saw that enormous and just breathtaking quilt. Please, you got to tell me the story behind that.
The story. So we were blessed to be commissioned by the Museum of Food and Drink. And initially, they were located in Brooklyn and Williamsburg. They found us, as many people do, and they had an idea that in terms of how they were going to tell this part of the story of the landscape of food as it relates to Africans and African Americans. It's an ode to celebrating from 1619 forward. The brainchild of the project is co-curator Dr. Jessica B. Harris.
Mm,
And so she envisioned doing it in quilt, but then it was our job to manifest it and make it happen, to design it, to work with the right artists, photographers, assistants, a number of different layers, no pun intended, to creating a 14-foot by 30-foot Quilt,
Wow.
which had
Wow.
406 quilt blocks, of which
Hmm.
400 of them represented icons in the food landscape, agriculture,
Hmm.
beverage, commerce, inventions, and so on. And so it was not just the visual representation of it. I had to use my database development skills to build a database and keep track of every component of the project. We worked with Sylvia Hernandez and Laura Gadsden, as well as Ife Felix also participated in another component of another quilt as well as this quilt. So we were blessed to be able to be a part of the project. It is a very moving project. It is now closed, and it was also the inaugural project for that particular section of the Africa Center. And
Hmm.
I was delighted to, some years ago, I don't know, I think you were there, Curtis. There was like
Hmm.
a soft opening of the center, and
Hmm.
we had hard hats on.
Oh,
We got
yes.
to go through the center. It was just, raw space,
Yeah.
very raw. And I said to a friend, I said, I'm going to curate one of the first exhibits here, full of myself, totally full of myself.
Nice.
And I realized when the photo of me in the hard hat came up, I said, oh no, I did tell my friend Yasmin I was going to do that. So even though I didn't curate it, I was part of the vision of one of the first most monumental exhibitions in that site. It also included John Johnson's Ebony Test Kitchen, which was a
Mm-hmm.
major part of sharing the African American food experience through his kitchen, which was it was a state of the art kitchen for its time.
Hmm.
Mr. Johnson spared no expense to make sure that he had the right equipment, that chefs that came into his space had everything they needed. They tested recipes. There was a book that came out of that particular kitchen. I think it's actually a very large book. It's over 300 pages, I believe. So there
Hmm.
was a lot of history there, things that you wouldn't have known about. Let's see, who invented the lemon squeezer type?
Hmm.
It's like you put the lemon in, a black
Yep.
person. The ice
Yep.
cream scoop, the
Yep.
history of the Black Panthers and the food, free food programs.
Mm.
Of course, Uncle Nearest and the history
Yes.
of Jack Daniels. And Jack Daniels is really Uncle Nearest. He
Hmm.
learned from Uncle Nearest.
Yes.
There are countless inventions and patents that were a part of it, and just it's endless history. I believe there should be curriculum created surrounding this particular exhibition that goes from K through university level, because the dynamics of who we are in the landscape is endless, endless as African diasporic people. And so that was a delight for us to be a part of.
Excellent, excellent. And Night Watchman, I did actually see your eyes kind of widen when you heard Uncle Nearest. Is that true? Just checking. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
No.
You trying to make me out to be some sort of a
No.
lush?
Never to your face. Never, never.
I
So,
support Uncle Nearest. I think it's a fine product. And that's all I have to say about Uncle.
okay.
Okay, I have not had it yet, but
Mhm.
I
Oh,
intend to get a bottle soon. Should I tell a little bit about who Uncle Nearest is so that the audience knows? So, short story, you know who Jack Daniels is.
mhm,
Uncle Nearest was an enslaved African on another plantation who brought his distilling skills from, I believe it was Ghana.
mhm,
Jack Daniels came as a white man. He was a white man who came to that same plantation,
mhm,
later had his own distilling company, and Uncle Nearest was a part of that as well. And so Jack Daniels learned the distilling process from Uncle Nearest. It was
mhm.
like no other process that anyone had really seen. Fast forward, Uncle Nearest in the last, I would say maybe 3, 4 years, if not more, has gotten his due, and there is an Uncle Nearest whiskey, brandy.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yes. Yes,
The Uncle
indeed.
Nearest whiskey was
Whiskey
started by descendants of Uncle Nearest,
on Uncle
Okay.
Nearest.
and
Yes.
it is right now one of the most successful liquor brands, and they've been so successful they've even been able to basically invest in other black owned liquor brands. So
Hmm.
it's a true success story, and at least finally he's getting his due.
Yes, and look for the labels Uncle Nearest 1856 and 1884. You love him. So
Okay, you
on
know a
another,
lot about
I,
Uncle Near.
I,
Tried to deflect it on me. Okay.
well, now on another note, now Watchman, you said that you actually ran into her outside the Harlem State Office building. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yes.
But I need to know why. Why? Because right now, when we're speaking to her, she's in Detroit again. So please do tell us, Misha, what brings you back and forth to Detroit?
Well, I am curating in spaces in both Harlem and in Detroit. So in Harlem, we opened the 100 Years of Harlem Resonating Around the World exhibition at City College's Aaron Davis Hall. And that
Mm,
exhibition opened on Wednesday
wow.
and features 21 artists at this point from Harlem and artists who have been inspired by Harlem from around the world. That exhibition first opened, this is the second iteration of this exhibit. It
Hmm.
first opened at Christie's in March,
Okay.
and this was an auction and fundraiser for City College Center for the Arts. And beautiful show, very successful, beautiful collaboration with Christie's that was put together by Kim Wells and Gregory Shank
Hmm.
of City College, in which I had the opportunity to curate. However, the exhibition itself was only 1 week long, which didn't give everyone an opportunity to see it. Kurt, you were there, DJ LeRoy, and um, so we decided to restage it at Aaron Davis Hall. So it's mostly the complete exhibition, a few new works because some of the works were sold. So those artists were able to contribute new works.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
yeah, we were able to bring in two artists from Detroit. One, Tyree Guyton, who works with the New York Gallery. And Tyree has a very successful
Well,
operation here.
well,
The
quick question: is that the gentleman who was doing whitewashing of history?
Yeah, no, he wasn't in this part of the exhibition, but he was
Okay,
in the first exhibition at Christie's.
gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
Tyree does a public art project where he transformed um, a neighborhood, his neighborhood that had fallen into disrepair, and transformed it into a public art site, and it's become one of the major tourist attractions here in Detroit. And he does this in neighborhoods all around the world, so he's become very well known for that. So he
Mm,
has a piece in the City College exhibit, which was also in at Christie's, which is a car hood that he's
mm.
created into a piece of art, and it's called Faces in the Hood. So there's a
Okay.
actual portrait on the car hood.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, gotcha. Well, well,
So,
Also, Misha, it seems like you also have this affinity or connection to Detroit. Can you tell me about that?
well, I'm from Detroit. I
Mm,
was born and raised here. Of course, I spent most of my life, pretty much all of my adult life, in New York and between Brooklyn and Harlem, and primarily in Harlem. So
mm,
both places are home to me, and I feel this connection and similarity between Detroit and Harlem, both being kind of helping to build the cultural identity of Black America. And I feel that both places are kind of experiencing a similar sort of change.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both in a position where we need to own and hold on to and preserve our cultural spaces and our cultural legacy. And the way that I can do that, there are lots of ways that we can do that. We all need to do that, but the way that I can do that is through the arts. So being able to connect the two places between the arts is really what I'm striving to do.
Beautiful.
Part of
beautiful.
what I'm striving to do. Yeah.
Nice. And I guess one of the things that I also have been observing, Michelle, is that you had mentioned Shishama.
Yes.
And I know Shishama, of course, we talk about Anita, the daughter of Durst.
Anita Durst.
Exactly. So they used to have a space there in West Harlem out of Janus Properties. So they're no longer there, but now in East Harlem doing their thing?
Well, they're located in different places. So it depends on where they build their relationship. Shishama provides spaces that are not being used to artists, and in our case, an arts organization. We were blessed that this particular space became available. We took advantage of being here. 1791 Lexington Avenue. We named it the Urban Threads Salon 1791. We're between 111th and 112th. So we use the space as a gallery and creative space. We also host artist residencies here. We've had 2 so far this year. We're hoping to have a 3rd before the end of the year. We've hosted a designer who also works in sustainable fashion, who was here from Kenya, Ruth Abede of Blackfi Designs. We will be hosting Cassandra Brunfield, Body of Work. She is a designer and creative who will be here October 7th through the 9th. So we're using the space to do a number of different things. We will be hosting small workshop classes as the season progresses. We are still just being very cautious as it relates to in-person programming. We will always have art on the walls. Right behind me is a quilt azuka that was done by Anna Alvarez for an exhibition called Syncopated Threads, which was back in 2006. So we have right now Haitian art, Haitian Veves by Union des Arts. We have a quilt that we worked on with the Schaumburg Teen Curators back in 2016, work by Sahara Briscoe, Oluwaseyi Awuomi, excuse me, I try to always get it right. She's from Nigeria. Ife Felix, Alex Reynoso, Pat Mabry. And then we have a line of books related to the fields of quilting, fashion design, sustainability, spinning fibers. And we also have books that are on the so-called banned book list.
Wow.
So
wow.
There's commerce, there are visual presentations, gallery, and so we're gonna make it work for as long as we can be here. We are thankful to Anita Shishama for making it happen. So they're all over the city at this point, Shishama. So I encourage our artists who are out there to please check them out and apply for spaces. It's not always a long-term space, but it could be for a month. And it allows you the opportunity to make connections so that people can see your work.
Excellent.
Space.
Now, Michelle, can you give us a little bit of your journey? Because I understand you started out in information technology, and here you are in the midst of arts and culture. So I know there's an interesting story behind that, and I think we need to hear it.
Well, yes. My background is IT. Worked with database development for many years.
Wow.
Curtis knows I worked for a special events company for many years. But prior to that, worked for a nonprofit, what was then defined as the Black federation. There's the Asian Federation, Catholic, Jewish, so on and so forth. I worked for the Black Federation. And I've always had this responsibility of being that tech person as well as the marketing connector person. So that's who I am. How did I get into this world? I've always had a level of entrepreneurship from the time I was a child. So it's always me doing something, selling something. I used to sell, greeting cards back in the day where you go around and order your Christmas cards and get your name printed in it so that I could win all the goodies and that. But I also came from a woman, my aunt, Jean Nurse, who in Barbados, I grew up there. She, from the age of 16, did not want to work for white folks. And so she went and learned how to sew at 16, saved up enough money to buy her machine, which is a treadle machine, so it didn't have electricity at the time. And from then until when she sadly suffered a stroke, she was still working into her early 80s. And so for me, I've always, and of course, so many other Black people in my scope were always entrepreneurs, always had another profession. So the butcher, Mr. Lawville, was also the butcher who used to slaughter our livestock. And then, but he was a tailor during the week, Monday through Friday. So it was always, and this woman named Miss Pearl, and all these different people were always the doers and the making it happen. So fast forward to Harlem Needle Arts. I traveled to Senegal, had a business importing items at that time, mostly textile items. Bob knows, so Bob and I go back. I say B.A., before Aaliyah. That's before my she's going to be 28. And I knew Bob actually probably about 2-3 years before that. And so we were artisans, vendors at what was then called the African Street Festival at Boys and Girls High School.
Oh, yes.
It's now called the International African Art Festival. And so I was always doing something. We would buy items, we would culturalize them, I guess, for the lack of a better term, and give it a certain aesthetic. Harlem Needle Arts came about because my mother, there are a number of reasons. My mother wanted to learn how to crochet. There was no place in Harlem that I found that was teaching the craft. I knew how to do it. My mother wasn't listening to me. I went in search of, and then I said, I should host a class. One part of it. The other part of it is that I realized there was this cultural community that I knew it. I know Misha knew it. I know Bob knew it. I know all these people knew this community and had access. But I thought that there needed to be a place on a larger scale to present work, to arm artists with the tools to be teaching artists, to exhibit, how to package, their existence, go out to be on panels, how to apply for grants, so on and so forth. And major institutions have someone in their collection with some form of textile. It comes from ceremonies and rituals and things that are part of the existence of growing who we are as people. And started curating with Harlem Girls Quilting Circle, decided I wanted to do this on a more full-time basis. It was not easy, but I took the steps necessary to begin to build and manifest where we are today. We were founded in 2005. So it's been quite some time of building and having some of the momentous opportunities that I could have never imagined, having work being in the Newberger Museum at Purchase University as part of a project with artist Teresa Margolis. We Have a Common Thread was the name of the project, and being the only entity in the United States to be represented as part of that exhibition, which included Panama, Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, the United States, and there was one other country that I can't remember. And so there have been endless opportunities, and you can't, when you put something out into the world and you say, well, I want a space. I know it's difficult to have a space. It's time consuming. It's all these things. But I kid you not, about 4 months before I got the call from Shishama, I said, oh, I would love a Shishama space, even if it was for a month, because I could activate it. And then 4 months later, I get a call. It was only supposed to be for 1 month. And that was in March, and we're in September.
Wow, beautiful.
Our fingers crossed. Our fingers crossed. So that's how Harlem Needle Arts came about. We are just continuing to work with artists in the world of quilting, knitting, crochet, weaving, spinning fibers. What else? Fiber fusion. We've worked with artists, Dinga McCannon, Zenobia Bailey, Michael Cummings, Laura Gatson, Ife Felix, Harlem Girls Quilting Circle. Who else? Oluwaseyi, Alex Reynoso. I could go on. I am blessed that at a time where I didn't totally understand all of the grant processes, especially when it came to government funding, that many of the people that I just named said, "Oh, I will give you work to be a part of an exhibit." And there was once a corporation contacted us to do a Black History Month event. It was a one-day event. So we would bring the items in, install the work, do the presentation, deinstall. And
Wow, that's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work. We would be compensated, but then they decided they wanted 2 of the pieces for their permanent collection.
Oh, nice.
I couldn't ask for that. And so that then, allowed the 2 artists to now be in a major collection of a major company. That's out of, it's a world international company. But those opportunities, I could run down all the list of things that have gotten us to this place, and the access to just broadening the scope and the narrative. Most people think it's just women's work. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's so much greater and larger. The world of textile is not gender specific. Men in Morocco are tapestry crocheters. In Nigeria, they have the Egungun Festival where they create the costume for the masquerade. Senegal, we have tailors. I could go on. If we really look at our society, there's a balance of all genders participating in the evolution of textile and making and creating.
Nice. So I guess just like you, Misha, as we heard from Michelle. So I'm going to say BK, and that is before kids. Tell me about your journey.
Well, there was little BK for me because I had just gotten to New York and just knew I wanted to be in an art space. Started designing jewelry and developed a business from that, selling my work to stores across the country, but ultimately decided I didn't want to produce the jewelry on that level, and I wanted to create it and present it more as art. And at that point, I was able to develop a relationship with Studio Museum of Harlem, and have worked with them for many years, and I look forward to continuing that relationship when they reopen, hopefully soon. And started presenting it, exhibiting the work. But also I began working for the Children's Art Carnival as a teaching artist in 2002. And ultimately graduated into doing arts administration there under the leadership of Marlene Martin, know and love. And I started teaching for Symphony Space the following year in 2003. And through that program, and I'm actually still on their staff. I did not teach this year because of COVID, but up until last year, I was still teaching with them, and we were able to do those classes remotely. But it's an interesting program because we go into schools at all levels throughout the city and teach about different cultures by looking at their art.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, most of what we know about ancient civilizations is from their art and, you know, the objects that people created. So that's really been a kind of lifelong learning experience for me as well, because I initially started teaching in the African program for them. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I'm African. I know about African art. And then they asked me to teach in the American program. And I said, oh yeah, you know, cool. I'm American. I can do that too. And then they asked me to teach in the Asian program. And I said, no, I'm not.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I said, just come to the meeting. Don't say no. Just come to the meeting, check it out, see what it's about. And taught in that program, you know, more than 10 years now, and it's actually one of the most exciting programs that I've had to teach with for them. So yeah, that kind of led me to curating for different organizations. Of course, you know, I went on to work for the LeRoy Neiman Art Center. Was able to curate a lot of projects and provide exposure and support for local artists through those exhibitions and programs. And Art Harlem, if you remember, used to do the Harlem Open Artist Studio Tour.
Yeah, yes.
I actually got my first curatorial experience with Art Harlem, working with, you know, dozens of artists throughout Harlem from 110th Street all the way up to Washington Heights and Inwood. And then that kind of leads me to Detroit. You know, my family had a property here, and we had an opportunity to create something in this community that is rapidly changing, like many of our communities throughout the country, throughout the world, really. And I just saw an opportunity here to create a space for people, you know, native Detroiters, Black Detroiters, just to do some creative placemaking to make sure that this conversation that's happening here in the arts, in business and entrepreneurship, in real estate, that we remain a part of that.
Nice. Okay.
And I just, even in Harlem, you know, I'm back and forth now, so I'm trying to grasp what's happening there. And of course, with COVID, everything has changed. So we're all creating what the present and the future looks like after COVID. You know, nothing is the same.
Nothing at all. But you know what? I got to also say, and I heard it from you, Michelle. So with Shashama, the space may be temporary at best, because remember, the developer or landlord, if they come up with let's say a more profitable project, then the artists are out, so to speak. So I guess university, I'm going to ask you guys, is there enough space out there for creatives?
In the city of New York, which is the center for arts in not only the country, but the world, no, there are not enough spaces for artists. As you all know, artists sometimes are working multiple jobs. They can't just focus on the arts in some cases. This is not to be a downer, but we need more artist spaces. We need live work spaces for artists in New York City. Of course, real estate in New York City is at a premium for all. But we're running out of space. Or I dare say we ran out of space. So how do we, as a city, look at engaging and understanding what it really takes to elevate artists? It's not just artists of a certain time period. We have to look at the growth. We are the future is now. Okay. And so to that respect, this is a loose, analogy. You look at a Picasso, but you have to look at the now. I have to look at a Zenobia Bailey now. I have to look at a Duncan McCannon now. I have to look at, people who have a professional life that spans some 50 plus years. So how are we investing in our community of artists? How can more developers work with programs like Shishama? There are other programs who do similar work. And, of course, we have the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, which does stuff on Governor's Island. So now that's another source for artists to apply for residencies, because now Governor's Island is open year round. But there is a tremendous need. The blessing and the curse of textile is that in some cases, yes, you can work at home. And most of the the artwork that's in here now has been created in your average apartment.
Okay.
No big studios, no sponsors, no residency spaces. That's why we took 3 days out of the week to say, here you are, artists, use the space. We try to keep it open so it flows. We have spinning wheels in here. We have, what else? Sewing machines. We have all the things that you need. One artist, Sahara Briscoe, brought in her knitting machine so that she could work on a project. But we need more spaces. We need to really think about, and also because artists' income levels vary. So you may get a commission today that is X thousands of dollars,
Right.
but you have to really live off of that until you can produce the next commission. And if you don't have the administrative and artistic support, then you're a one-man show. So there are lots of aspects of what needs to happen.
Gotcha. And Misha, certainly I know that you were having your art stored in your apartment, right? And also having a son who's also an artist. I mean, how did you navigate that space there? What was going on?
There's a lot of art everywhere. It's a shared art and live space. It is a challenge, and even here in Detroit, we have a residency program where we provide space for artists to work, to stay, to live temporarily and work. But one thing I realized is that in all of this, I had not created a space for myself to work. So I'm actually in the process of carving out a studio for myself here, which is something that I've never really done. I've always, shared my living space with my art space, which has worked out fine. But it does, in my case, hamper my ability to produce work. So I'm looking forward to having and creating my space. But I also realize it's a blessing that I'm in a position to be able to do that, and not every artist is in a position to do that. And I do feel in New York, one of the things that I'm feeling a lot when I'm there is I do feel the absence of Chishama's workspace that they used to have on 126.
Yep.
There were, that's created a gaping hole, I feel, in the creative community. And there was another workspace that was, do you remember there was another art workspace that was further east in the 140s? It used to be a warehouse and it had been a workspace for a while. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was Workspace Harlem.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, however, there is a tremendous need for the artist community to be able to come together. In addition to just to artists having space to create their work, it was a creative, melting pot that brought ideas and support and just artists and we need that kind of community and spaces to just be together, not so much in a context of an event or an exhibition or a reception, but in the context of creation.
Right.
Well, here's something. So, some years ago, there was a proposal, and the particular group came before Community Board 10, Central Harlem. But
Yes.
the group was out of Brooklyn, and of course,
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Spaceworks. So,
Yes.
so why was that so controversial? I will let you guys answer. Michelle.
Yes, I was at that meeting.
Oh.
Here's what I will say. Actually, I was approached before that meeting. Let's see, how can I say this?
No, go for it. You're amongst family. You know that. So go ahead.
Here's what I will say. I think when you really have to know the community that you're dealing with. And it's like bringing a big box store into the community.
Okay.
If you don't know that you are creating a mall in East Harlem and you don't have Goya products and you don't have our candles and you don't have this, then you need not be here because you cannot sell what you sell here.
Yes.
In where you sell on 66th Street, let's say. And so what I say about that project is that they didn't do their homework. There were a number of people that were involved that knew nothing about the community. They were pushing it.
Right.
And I get there definitely was a need for the space, but the structure of that program wasn't thought out very carefully. And then it became, well, if it's in Harlem, only Harlem residents. Well, it's hard to say.
Right.
I think one of the things about Harlem is that we need a really strong arts development administrative entity.
Yeah.
So the administrative behind the scenes, all the administrative work that I do, I don't get to create a thing. I haven't touched a needle and thread in over 5 years or yarn or whatever the case is. Okay, but that's, I choose to be this sort of administrative person, which is fine. But how could that be better balanced if there was a support system that helped artists and arts organizations, arts cultural organizations get to a certain threshold? And then, okay, then how do we get to the second threshold so that we can develop our growth, so that we can amplify into building spaces, so that, you have everything you need. It's like, the concierge that supports an apartment building, let's say.
Yes.
Something that's going to be that supporting factor as you grow. So now Spaceworks doesn't even exist anymore. As of COVID, DCLA got rid of it altogether.
Wow.
They're gone. They don't exist anymore. I don't know if they'll come back. The project in Harlem was squashed. Even this is before COVID.
Right.
And you have to know what are the geographic lines of Harlem, and that at least one of the community board meetings, the person presented said something like, "Oh, Harlem starts at 90th Street." Oh, the crowd went crazy. You also, you really have to have, and I'm going to go into my tech space for a second. You really have to have a strong database of who's in our community. Who are they? What is their profile like? Because then you need to query out what people do, so that you can say, well, if you are a jewelry designer, Well, what are your needs for a studio? Who do you market to? We have people that are in this, in this community that are doing business all over the world. But
Mm-hmm.
how do we showcase that as Harlem?
Mm. Right,
So
right.
that's important and critical. So I'll
No,
land that
that,
there.
no, that's good. So let's say, so Night Watchman, you are in a co-locating workspace there, and that's of course where you had the relationship with Michelle. Are there many more of these spaces in the planning stages that
Well,
you know of?
ironically, we're in the space that used to be the LeRoy Neiman Gallery. So
That's
Uh-huh.
we're
right.
in a space that is supporting entrepreneurship, but it was a space that was strictly an art gallery,
Right.
and it's not
Mhm.
there anymore. And those are the issues. As we talked about, real estate is at a premium, and oftentimes the economics don't work for these type of spaces. And I agree with Michelle that we really need to think about some other sorts of support systems that can help facilitate the sustainability of art, because it's such an important thing in our culture, whether it be in Harlem, Detroit, Atlanta, you name it, art, or Africa or the Caribbean. The art has been such an important part of our culture, but also, and what I appreciate about what Omo and Michelle are doing, they are helping to facilitate that sustainability, because one of the issues that we've had with our artists is just that other people profit from their work a lot more than they do. and
Mm.
so our culture needs to be protected. It's intellectual property. And in many cases, in fact, I wanted to ask Michelle about that, because textiles, what is how do you can you copyright your designs? What is the intellectual property protection? Because I know that in the age of digital scanning, somebody can scan a pattern and reproduce it en masse, and artists may or may not ever see any royalties from it at all. So how do we protect artists in this age and stage?
Well, for us, the business of textile art, which is really kind of covers all art, but it there are some difficulties.
Mm.
And it's interesting because Saturday night I got this same exact question. We screened a film called Wax Print, which
Mm.
talked about the history of what so-called African print is, or African textile, which is not African at all. It's actually Dutch. And
Mm.
someone says, how do we stop the Chinese market from producing, and bound, moving out the Africans from selling, well, the Dutch textile. And I said,
Mm.
well, it's difficult. You would be fighting from now until the end of time. If
Mm.
you were to take, if I were to copyright what's behind me, someone sees it and they reproduce it. I
Mm.
don't have a team of lawyers to
Right,
fight
right.
them. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, and in some cases, these business entities, they change names, they change hands.
Mm-hmm.
Today is John Smith's, company A, and tomorrow is Smith John company B. It's not to say that it cannot happen. We strive to make sure that we tell artists that we're working with to start out with the legal. I even
Mm-hmm.
sent out something yesterday. I said, if the entity doesn't have a contract, you send them your contract so
Mm-hmm.
that you know what the languaging is, what the rights are of your work.
Mm-hmm.
The what, in the case of Dinga McCannon.
Mm-hmm.
Dinga sold a piece to John Johnson in the 70s. And I think it was right before COVID or during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The piece sold for $160,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the time she sold it, there was no agreement, which is fine. There's not. But today, if you buy a work from someone, they have the right to give you a contract that
Mm-hmm.
says, if you resell this, For the life and existence of this work, I get X percentage. You cannot publish this as your own. I have the right to borrow it. So we have to, as creatives on any level, we do have to stop and do the administrative part of it. Thankfully, here in New York, we have volunteer lawyers for the arts, the Lawyers Alliance, New York Foundation for the Arts. There are a number of entities that have components that deal with the legal structure. And we have to do the business of our art before we even go forward. Otherwise, it's a fight.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? Going back to what Michelle was describing in terms of SpaceWorks, you were familiar with that as well, Omo. Is that correct?
I didn't hear the question,
Oh,
Curtis. My sound is kind of going in and out.
It's a little wonky. Okay, so no, you're
I can hear
familiar
you.
with. You can hear me now. So
Yes.
you're familiar with SpaceWorks and what they were proposing, and your thoughts in terms of what they were planning for that particular space, the former Mart 125.
I was familiar that they had presented a proposal and that there was some opposition. I know them from Brooklyn. I've been to their space and I know that the work that they do there. So I wasn't really clear on what the opposition was or why there was opposition. Artists do need space. If it was that their program needed some fine tuning or needed to be tailored to our community, I think that is something the community is responsible for helping them with if they were open to do that. I don't fault them for not knowing the needs of the community coming in, but they were presenting an option to fulfill a need. And if we needed to help them to meet our needs, it's up to us to do that. Now, again, I'm saying that not knowing the details of what they present.
Plus, there's a curse on Mart 125.
It became a situation that it was more than artists, and who had the rights to be in that space, who were the original occupants of the space when the Mart opened. And so, although I never heard of some of the opposition until this project came forth. And so from my perspective, it's like, okay, you're no longer an occupant in this space. This is a new project. This is a new time.
Right.
But the flip side of that is that the organization SpaceWorks, there wasn't a clear line as, do we have to pay for the space? Do we not have to pay for the space? How long? Because it wasn't just performance space. How do you work with the different types of arts? How long can they be in the space? Sylvia Hernandez, she was in a SpaceWorks space for years. In Brooklyn, of course, COVID happened. She no longer has the space.
Wow.
And so it worked very well in Brooklyn.
And in Queens.
Queens, yes. Yes.
Okay.
But the Harlem part, and like you say, the Mart, it's cursed. I wish it wasn't. I really wish that we had a space that we could really create a cultural center. We need cultural centers, art centers. LeRoy Neiman Art Center was a phenomenal space. The Children's Art Carnival is a phenomenal space. Harlem School of the Arts. We need more spaces.
What do you think about, let's say, well, I'm going to give you a couple of spaces and give me your impressions. Let's say Art Space in East Harlem that also has, let's say, a residential portion, and also Sugar Hill Museum, who recently have a new ED in the form of, I believe, Rob Fields. So give me your thoughts on those two. Anyone?
Um, the El Barrio Art Space PS 109
Uh-huh.
is a phenomenal space. I
Nice.
recently went there for a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a model that needs to be replicated
Got it.
in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
They got everything right. I'm not saying everything's perfect. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I know
Okay.
what I see. I know
Mm-hmm.
that it's a space where they provide housing for
Mm-hmm.
artists.
Mm-hmm.
They and all of the spaces for artists, but then they have studio spaces.
Mm-hmm.
They have gallery spaces. The
Beautiful.
lowest level of the property are for like arts organizations in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I was there as a tenant in the lower space,
Mm-hmm.
but then they have other spaces that are mixed use spaces that one could come in and rent the space. And so if you're a community member, a community organization, you can rent a performance space or a creative space. You can host workshops there. And so that's on East 99th Street
Mm-hmm.
in East Harlem. It was formerly a school. So
Right.
they, reconfigured it into a living space. Of course, being a school, it has very high ceilings, so
Yeah.
that's great for creating.
Mm-hmm.
And on the apartment floors, they use the wall space as gallery space for the artists that live on that floor.
Beautiful.
That
Nice.
is a perfect model.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subsidized program.
Mm-hmm.
I wish that we could do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, New York City is kind of running out of space, and or I would say how they use the spaces are not always for entities like arts and culture. It's more, as they say now, luxury. So there's, I have nothing against developers, but it's more of a city state conversation as
Yes.
to how we want to grow and
Mm-hmm.
build, and also not get stagnant in the development of programs like this. Like, what are the artists? How are the artists accountable for having the opportunity to be in spaces? The Sugar Hill Museum space, that building, it's a space that has a museum in the lower level. Of course, the Universal Hip Hop Museum, of course, the 145th Street Bridge
The
is
water.
another
Mm-hmm.
model, which will have housing above, museum below.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the dynamics in terms, I'm sure it's a mixed income space.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how, and also what is the conversation that municipalities are having about artists' income? So, like I said earlier, great commission today, but tomorrow, what happens? What happens next month? So, how do we kind of balance that
Mm-hmm.
and respect that
Gotcha.
and honor that and give opportunities?
Night Watchman, my brother.
Well, we
What?
got to wrap up. I want to take some last words from our guests. First of all, thank you so much for not only joining us on the show, but just for the work that you're doing, supporting the artist journey here in Harlem and in the country. Michelle, any last words? And if you can share some information on where you can be contacted.
Certainly. Harlem Needle Arts is currently at our website is up on the screen, but you can always get us at the Urban Thread Space at 1791 Lexington Avenue. We're here Wednesdays through Saturdays from 12 until 6. Usually we keep our information updated on our website. There's an Urban Threads portal. Like I said, Cassandra Brumfield body of work will be here October 7th through the 9th. And we'll keep you up to date. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Please reach out to us. Our telephone number, 212-491-8581. That will change soon, but calls will be forwarded to a cell phone.
Beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you for having me. Thank you for sharing, and
Uh,
thank you for partnering me with Misha, who has been in the art scene for over 20 years, and highly respect her work.
Beautiful. And Misha, give us some closing thoughts. And where can they reach you? I see your website right there.
Yes, homomisha.com, also irwinhousegallery.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Right now, you can see the 100 Years of Harlem Resonating Around the World exhibit at City College's Aaron Davis Hall through December 20th. And we'll also have some more programming coming up with that exhibition. And let's see. I can do that. The best number to reach me at is 313-932-7690. And as a last thought, I mean, right now, my kind of prevailing thought is just protecting our culture.
Nice.
And preserving our culture and just everyone being more intentional about that. But also, and this is just another little thought I had walking through Harlem, remembering Chishama. I was on 126th Street looking at the development that's going on that block between Broadway and Amsterdam. Of course, Columbia has a giant.
Yes, they do.
I have no idea what's going in there. Maybe you can fill me in on that. Some new, kind of upscale luxury residential buildings. And I just had one thought for Chishama, and that is buy the building. That's it.
I will send that message to Anita.
Okay, yes, indeed.
But buy the building.
Yes.
Then we don't have to keep moving. I mean, their programs are amazing. I love what they're doing and the space and the communities that they provide for artists. But ultimately, even if you have a space for a short time, it's better than not having it at all.
Yes.
Correct.
But I'd love for them to buy the building. That's all.
NightWatchman.
On that.
Take us home, NightWatchman.
For our guests.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks
for joining us. You've been here on Soul Lounge Prime Time on WHCR 90.3 FM, 7 p.m. on Mondays, live streaming on YouTube and Facebook at 8 o'clock. Come back and join us. We always have the most interesting guests in Harlem and the world.